After 7 years, a millionaire widower follows his nanny. What he discovered will inspire you. Jake Thompson stared at the resignation letter on his desk, disbelief washing over him. Sarah, his steadfast nanny, was leaving. Her decision shattered the fragile facade of his life. Beneath the luxurious exterior of his Maplewood mansion, Jake struggled with a suffocating loneliness that he had buried deep for far too long. 7 years since the untimely death of his wife, he had filled the void with relentless work, a real estate empire built on concrete and cold ambition. But in the depths of his being, he felt nothing but emptiness. "It's time for me to chase my dreams," she had written. The words echoed in his mind as he ran a hand through his hair, feeling the pressure settle in his chest. What dreams? Did she dare to step beyond the confines of this household? He dismissed Sarah's aspirations, the same way he pushed aside his own hopes. With his children as the only remnants of a love forever lost, he had become a ghost in his own life, $1 million shell filled with haunting memories. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Realization struck him. He had taken Sarah for granted, allowing her warmth to cushion the sharp edges of his grief. Now, without her, he was left to confront the sorrow he had long relegated to the shadows. The house was filled with her laughter, her kindness, and yet he felt paralyzed by the weight of expectation. He was supposed to be the supremely successful family man, but the truth was, he felt completely unprepared for the tasks of raising his children alone. Over the next few days, an unfamiliar urge stirred within him to follow her to see what lay beyond the confines of his bubble. That morning, Jake found himself wandering onto the local university campus, his heart drumming a nervous rhythm against his ribcage. It buzzed with ambition and creativity, intimidating in its vibrancy. He felt a world away from everything he had known, the clutches of financial success fading into the background. Sarah swept into her classes, her spirit radiant and alive. He observed her from a distance, his heart clenching with both jealousy and admiration. How had he not seen the depth of her passion, the fervor with which she poured herself into her education? As the days slipped by, Jake encountered students who spoke candidly about their struggles, dreams, and passions. Their words stirred feelings he had tried so hard to ignore, a longing to share moments with others, to feel connected again. But amidst this newfound awareness, Jake felt the darkness creeping in again. How could he embrace this world and potentially lose the image he had strived so hard to maintain? He wrestled with himself, a tangle of doubt and fear gnawing at him. Would pursuing comfort outside his expectations come at a cost he wasn't ready to pay? Just when he thought he might find the words to express his awakening feelings towards Sarah, a devastating realization took hold. Was he truly ready to discard everything he had worked to build? The very notion made him tremble. As his heart raced in tandem with his swirling thoughts, he stood at the precipice of something undefinable, a choice that could uproot his carefully curated life and redefine success on his own terms. What would that mean for his children? And for Sarah? Jake's breaths quickened, the weight of the moment settling over him like a shroud. He was hanging in a delicate balance, looming at the edge of transformation, his heart, bruised but yearning, ready for more. The questions pressed heavily on his mind, making every decision bleed into uncertainty. One truth stood at the forefront: he could no longer ignore the inviting possibility of love, nor the darkness of isolation that threatened to consume him. In that moment of agony and clarity, everything hung in a fragile balance, leaving Jake teetering on the edge of an irrevocable choice. Jake stumbled upon a realization that gripped his soul. In the absence of Sarah, he had not just lost help, but a pivotal part of his own identity. The silence in the mansion, once a monotonous backdrop to his relentless work, now screamed of his solitude. He had spent years constructing barriers to protect himself from pain, but maybe those same barriers had created an unyielding prison. The campus became an unlikely sanctuary. Each day, he returned, drawn by the same energy that made Sarah come alive in those classrooms. Conversations with students challenged him. They questioned what it meant to live authentically. Slowly, Jake began to inch closer toward confronting his own neglected ambitions. He spent afternoons observing workshops, listening to impassioned speeches, and feeling the tremors of his discontent rise into fervor. It struck him, he had become a spectator, waiting for permission to engage in his own life. One Saturday morning, reflecting on his children's pending futures, he found himself on his patio, staring at the restless garden, overgrown, unkempt, a direct reflection of his own neglected passions. He envisioned a time when he once thrived on creative projects, dynamically building spaces, finding joy in architecture before the weight of the world crushed that light. The thought sent a pulse of urgency through him. There was a spark, a flicker of who he could be again, buried deep within the shadows. He tore into his past with fervor, digging out sketches and designs from his days at university. Late into the night, fueled with inspiration, he pored over these dormant plans. Could he take the plunge into a new venture, reconnecting with the essence of his youth? It wouldn't be easy, but Sarah's words haunted him: chase your dreams. That next week, he scheduled meetings with a handful of architects and developers. Each conversation rattled him to the core, forcing him to relay his visions and ideas. With every pitch, he felt fear clawing at his shoulders, but alongside it came a strange exhilaration. Jake realized how long he had denied himself the opportunity to dream, to be vulnerable in front of others, something he had witnessed in Sarah's embracement of college life. The idea of incorporating modern designs into community spaces began to bloom in his mind. It was an exhilarating plan, an avenue to bring together his philanthropic side and the creative passion that had been stifled for so long. In a bold move, he decided to host a community forum, an event that would encourage discussions on local architecture while also allowing others to share their visions and hopes. It hinted at a connection he yearned for. Perhaps it was his way of paving a new path forward. As the week unfolded, the weight of those conversations and plans transformed his soul. The lingering doubts still lurked in the corners of his mind, bringing forth questions about whether his children might miss their father being present. But a profound urge coursed through him: could rediscovering his passion serve as a beacon for them? Showing them that life after loss could be a soulful adventure, not just a shadowed existence. Yet, just as he began to shape a new narrative, a life where he could embrace vulnerability and connection, a text pinged on his phone. It was from Sarah, touching upon her future plans and the daunting decision she was facing. A heated thread of emotions coursed through him. It hit him: this was not just about moving forward, it was about confronting the ghosts of his past, his admiration for Sarah, the vulnerability he had cast aside, and the potential for healing he had overlooked. As Jake stood at those crossroads, he felt the air humming with unresolved tension, every choice crackling with electric possibility. Everything he had learned loomed large, pushing him toward inevitable confrontation. Would he summon the courage to unravel the messy knots of his heart? Would he finally have the conversation that could change everything, not only for himself but for Sarah as well? The air was thick with uncertainty, and in this moment of clarity and confusion alike, he knew his next step could propel him into the unknown. Jake stared at his phone, uncertainty swirling within him. Sarah had always had the ability to hit a nerve, yet now her words felt like a tether back to what he had locked away. He could feel the walls of his carefully constructed life begin to quiver, teetering on the edge of a monumental shift. He needed to respond, to bridge the gap that had widened in her absence. Taking a deep breath, Jake tapped out a reply. "I'm here if you need to talk. Let us meet." With that simple decision, an energetic pulse surged through him. The barriers he had built began to rattle, and he welcomed the shift, realizing that vulnerability could ignite change. The next day, as he prepared for their meeting, Jake struggled with the question of how to present himself. He longed to show the progress he'd made, the dreams stirring within him, yet bits of doubt chipped away at his confidence. Would she see his ambition as childish? Would the years that separated them sentimentalize what they once had? Arriving at the coffee shop, he felt the weight of anticipation. The hometown ambience was a stark contrast to the plush confines of his mansion. Here, life was raw, unpolished, and real. He took a seat at a table, mind racing with various scenarios of their conversation, when the door swung open, and there stood Sarah, cutting through the noise with her familiar warmth. Their eyes met, 1,000 words hung unspoken in the air. As she approached, he couldn't help but admire how natural she looked, her vibrant personality reflecting against the backdrop of his own internal chaos. They exchanged pleasantries, a gracious dance of acknowledgement and reality, but the undertones of their shared history lurked just below the surface. As they settled in, Sarah detailed her struggles with her upcoming transition into a new career. Her ambitions mirrored the passion that Jake had just begun to rediscover. He leaned in, fascinated by her fervor, recalling the times they had spent contemplating big dreams together. This was no longer just a conversation between a former boss and his nanny. It was a confrontation with their intertwined pasts and diverging futures. Jake knew what he had to do.
"I've been thinking a lot about what it means to chase dreams, you know?
I think I've been too caught up in fear to truly engage with mine. Your move away from all this, it inspires me to embrace my own ambitions." As he uttered those words, he felt the revelation wash over him.
The essence of his identity was reborn in the fervor of possibility.
Sarah looked at him with surprise, and in that moment, Jake felt a connection rekindle, a melding of their aspirations.
"I always believed in you, Jake," she said softly, but her gaze had shifted. It was no longer that of a subordinate, but of a kindred spirit. The conversation pivoted around their mutual hopes, dreams, and the trials of stepping into the unknown. They displayed vulnerability, weaving their tales of struggle and fear. And as they spoke, Jake discovered something remarkable. Every shared moment helped dismantle the walls he had forged around his heart. It was alarming yet liberating. Yet, as they contemplated their futures, a familiar tension pulsed through him, the moment feeling too fragile, too fleeting. Would this connection transform how he approached his architectural endeavors?
What if, in accepting his own vulnerabilities, he could help others do the same? Just as the conversation reached a fever pitch, a stranger walked by their table, overhearing snippets of their discussion about community spaces and modern designs.
Jake felt a sudden jolt of terror and inspiration.
It was a new opportunity. Could the chance to collaborate arise from such serendipitous encounters? Before he could process it all, Sarah's phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. A new opportunity, yet it carried implications far beyond their current meeting. As she glanced with uncertainty at her screen, her expression shrouded in apprehension, Jake realized that their next steps were intertwined more than he had anticipated. He fought to maintain the
momentum they had just built.
The fabric of their conversation stretched taut with unifying threads, yet now a discordant note rang true. The unknown awaited them both with bated breath.
Would it cruelly unravel, or would they find a way to weave their aspirations together, overcome their fears, and forge ahead into an uncharted future?
Let us not waste this moment, he decided, embracing the fear with fervor. If we're going to confront our fears, let us do so together.
But as he spoke, a deeper realization crept in. Were they ready to face what truly resided at the heart of their connection?
The air hung thick with uncertainty, and he wondered if the next step could bridge dreams with reality, or if it would lead to a fragile unraveling. A silence enveloped their table, stretching the moment into an uncomfortable anticipation. Jake's heart raced as he scanned Sarah's face, searching for a sign that she was willing to navigate the path he proposed. The energy between them shifted, charged with the promise of an adventure, yet it felt precarious.
Together?
The word rolled off her tongue, tentative.
You really believe we could take our dreams and turn them into something real?
Her question resonated deep within him, revealing the gravity of what he was suggesting. He wasn't just inviting her into a professional venture, he was tying together their hopes, their fears, and unearthing emotions they had buried.
Why not?
He replied, feeling an urgency rise.
What's stopping us?
We have the skills, the ideas. I've let doubt hold me back for too long.
And hearing you talk about your passion, it's reignited something in me. Sarah's eyes glimmered, and for a split second, Jake envisioned a partnership that transcended their past, a collaboration to innovate and inspire.
But a fleeting shadow crossed her face.
I don't know, Jake.
There's a lot at stake. He sensed her trepidation, a reflection of his own insecurities. The thought of stepping into uncharted territory sent currents of anxiety spiraling within him. Yet, this was a fork in the road. He needed to push past the fear that clung to him like a second skin. What's at stake? He questioned, leaning closer, searching her eyes for answers.
A bit of risk? Isn't that where growth lives?
As he articulated his thoughts, he felt an emerging resolve. Leaving behind his old life and the isolation it bred felt increasingly essential. If he could channel his vision into something meaningful, it wasn't only about professional success. it was about facing the person he had become. "I want to build something that connects the community," he stated, the words flowing freely now, inspiring him further. "We could create spaces that actually reflect the needs and desires of people. It's not just about architecture, it's about leaving a legacy." Inspired by his sincerity, Sarah's hesitation softened slightly. "But it's more than just a project, isn't it? This is about us, too." The complexity of their dynamic brought a mix of elation and dread crashing together. They were both carrying the scars of their past, and the vulnerability of diving into this partnership could unravel everything that had reformed in their earlier conversation. What if their aspirations couldn't mesh? Jake contemplated the idea. "Yes, it is about us," he acknowledged, feeling his pulse quicken. "But embracing apprehension is the only way we can truly succeed." He felt the room close around them as he took a risk with his next words. "We've reached this tipping point, Sarah. I've been distracted by my fears too long. If I don't take this leap now, I might watch my dreams wither away." For a moment, the weight of vulnerability hung in the air between them, unacknowledged yet pressing. Sarah became lost in thought, her gaze drifting toward the window, ephemeral but profoundly engaged in their next move. "All right," she finally replied, taking a deep breath, the resolve in her voice causing a spark in Jake's chest. "Let us explore this. But it means full commitment. We confront our visions and fears head-on." He nodded slowly, sensing the dawn of an adventure tinged with new uncertainty. "Absolutely. But it also means that we confront what happened between us, doesn't it?" Without fully processing the implication of his words, Jake felt the gravity shift again. After drawing back the curtain on ambition, intimacy began to bubble back to the surface. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Sarah met his gaze, those once distant memories whispering through their shared history. Something deeper, perhaps unacknowledged, flickered between them. Could this be the catalyst, or would the pressure of their past choices suffocate their burgeoning connection? Just then, her phone buzzed again. The interruptions of the outside world reminded them both of the reality they had to face. With a cautious nod, they began to discuss tangible plans, the initial sparks of a collaborative endeavor forming on the lunch table. Yet Jake couldn't shake the question that loomed as thickly as the discussion itself: would this partnership forge a new path toward dreams, or would unresolved feelings unravel them before they even began? Jake stared at the table, lost in thought as the conversation simmered to a halt. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. He felt both a flicker of hope and an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Could he really lead a venture with Sarah, transforming their shared aspirations into reality? Beneath the initial enthusiasm lay layers of apprehension that he couldn't entirely shake. What's the first step? Sarah's voice cut through the haze, infused with a mix of enthusiasm and caution. His mind raced. "We could start small. Maybe sketch out a few ideas, what we want to prioritize, what we believe our project should embody." "Right, but we also need a framework to build upon." She bit her lip, the nervousness creeping back. A true vision doesn't just materialize. It requires structure. He felt the fire of determination reignite within him. "We could create a mission statement. Something that encapsulates our goals and the values we want to express through our work." The suggestion energized the conversation, pushing them into brainstorming mode. As they bounced ideas off of each other, Jake reminded himself that this was more than just a project. It was a chance to confront his own limitations and envision a future where he thrived, not just survived hours past. And with each new concept they explored, Jake began to recognize the threads binding their ideas. The exhilaration of planning intertwined with the uneasiness of what each choice might mean for their relationships, not just as colleagues but as people entwined with shared histories and emotional scars. "Let us be honest," Sarah eventually said, her tone shifting from excitement to seriousness. "Beyond the project, we need to navigate what we mean to each other. We can't just gloss over that." Jake swallowed hard. "You're right. It's crucial we're on the same page about everything: our past, our present, and where we want to go." This line of conversation summoned memories, uninvited yet familiar. Moments of laughter, arguments, regrets, and missed chances crowded his mind. Each memory forced him to confront the complexity of his feelings.
Could they truly blend their professional ambitions with lingering emotional connections? What if we end up ruining everything? He pondered aloud, fear creeping back into his tone. What if rebuilding what we lost creates more chaos than clarity? Or, she countered, what if we find something even greater than what we had? What if by confronting our past, we create a stronger, healthier foundation?
The room buzzed with possibility and uncertainty. Jake realized that the path forward was ambiguous. His stomach knotted as he grappled with the conflicting emotions. The potential for growth shimmered brightly yet coexisted with the specter of possible failure. The thought of losing Sarah again terrified him. What if the risks we take bring us closer? He said, testing the notion in the space between them. A small smile played on Sarah's lips, but her eyes held a seriousness that drew him in. I'm willing to find out, but let us make one thing clear, this is all or nothing. We can't afford to hold back. Her conviction ignited something deep within him. Drawing on past courage, Jake nodded, understanding the implications of what lay before them. The journey ahead would require more than talent, it would demand vulnerability. Sharing ambitions meant illuminating fears that had been cloaked in silence. Then let us commit to doing this the right way together, he said, gaining strength, feeling the tide turning. Together, she echoed, her tone resolute, yet, even as they forged this new beginning, Jake felt the faint unease lurking beneath the surface. They both needed something transformative but remained uncertain about what that truly meant for their connection. As they prepared to outline their mission statement, he silently questioned what boundaries would be tested and whether they could withstand the pressure of intertwined dreams and realities. Would they emerge from this venture as collaborators, or might they find themselves grappling with something far more profound? The possibilities swirled around him, intoxicating yet intimidating. Jake took a deep breath, setting the stage for their next steps, unaware of how fragile the balance between ambition and emotion would prove to be. In the midst of their resolve, the real challenge lingered in the air, just beyond reach. Could they face their true selves together, or would the fears of the past bind them in ways more limiting than they ever imagined? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the window, and enveloping Jake in a cocoon of warmth as he drafted the mission statement with Sarah. Yet the comfort was deceptive. Beneath it, tension bubbled like a hidden fire. He wondered if mere words could encapsulate the complexity of what they sought to achieve. Let us start with values, Sarah proposed, her brow slightly furrowed. What do we want to manifest through our work? Jake felt a rush of clarity amid the brainstorming chaos. Authenticity, he replied, immediately envisioning a series of projects that celebrated real voices and genuine stories. Let us not just say it, let us weave it into every decision we make, she remarked, encouraged by his enthusiasm. Seeing Sarah's eyes light up gave him strength, but the glimmer of hope was clouded by apprehension. Could authenticity really guide their efforts and their personal dynamics? Would it hold them accountable as they navigated moments of disagreement, ambition, or even miscommunication? He felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him. As co-leaders, their performance in this creative venture would undeniably reflect on their respective growths. Jake had spent the last few years carefully building walls, ensuring that he remained emotionally guarded, afraid of showing weakness. Would dismantling those walls lead to growth or further entrapment and vulnerability? I think responsibility has to go hand in hand with that, he mused, tapping the pen against the paper. We need to hold ourselves accountable for both our actions and our shared goals. Exactly. Sarah interjected, her passion palpable. If we can challenge ourselves to be transparent about our struggles and victories, imagine how that might resonate with those we want to reach. Inspired, Jake delved deeper into his thoughts. This venture, this collaboration, would not only allow him to craft narratives but would also serve as a crucible for personal growth. The thrill of possibility coursed through him. Yet doubt lingered. Could he maintain this sense of responsibility in the throes of creativity? He set the pen down, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. What if we fail? What if the dedication we're pouring into this doesn't translate the way we hope it does, or worse, it strains our connection? Her gaze bore into his, unwavering. But what if we succeed, Jake? This is the moment where we redefine what we mean to each other. We have the chance to align our strengths to confront the past and grow from it.
Jake absorbed her words, recognizing that failure was an undeniable element of any meaningful journey. She was right, this challenge was layered with potential for both collaboration and growth. He wondered if he could embrace the lessons that came with success or calamity.
Then we have to be fearless together, he said, the resolve in his voice surprising himself. Let us commit to learning through both our triumphs and mistakes. Fearless together, she echoed, a hint of relief washing over her features. The air shifted. They had begun to weave a methodology, creating not just a mission statement but a blueprint for mutual growth. Yet despite Jake's newfound courage, a sliver of anxiety coiled within him, whispering doubts about whether he could abide by this commitment without losing himself again. As they continued refining their framework, Jake was struck by a sudden realization. This project was not only an avenue for creative expression but also a mirror reflecting his growth journey. If he could be vulnerable enough to share his vision, perhaps the experience could forge a deeper connection both professionally and personally. But before he could voice this revelation, Sarah glanced at her watch, breaking the moment. We should take a break and review what we created. Let us see how it feels. Closing his notebook, Jake's heart raced. This venture was evolving into something much larger than either of them had anticipated. But with every dream shared and plan crafted, he knew dark shadows of doubt would remain. What if the past constrained their progress more than they envisioned? As the evening deepened into night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that transformative lessons awaited them. But would they be able to confront them together? The stakes were higher than ever. Jake leaned back in his chair, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him as he stared at the outlines of their ideas sprawled across the pages. Each line they had written carried not just a vision for their work but also an unrelenting reminder of the bravery required to dismantle the walls he had so meticulously built over the years. He felt disoriented, caught between the exhilaration of possibility and the paralyzing fear of vulnerability. Do you want to go for a walk? Sarah asked, snapping him from his thoughts. Her tone was casual but there was an underlying urgency that intrigued him. He nodded, grateful for the distraction. They stepped outside into the cool evening air, the night sky a tapestry of stars that seemed to twinkle with the promise of potential. As they wandered, Jake noticed how effortless their conversation flowed. They discussed ideas, aspirations, and even fears, but the doubt within him hung like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow the brightness of their dialogue. Do you really think we can make this work? Jake asked, the vulnerability of the question exposing an insecurity he hadn't realized lurked beneath his earlier bravado. Absolutely, Sarah replied, her voice steady. But it won't be easy. We need to be open to change, to growth even when it feels uncomfortable. Her words resonated. He had spent so long protecting himself from discomfort, yet here she was, daring to brave it alongside him. Maybe that was the essence of what they were striving for, shared courage. How do you manage to stay so positive? Jake queried, genuinely searching for insight. I've learned that perspective is key. Life throws challenges at us, but it's how we respond that defines us, she said, her sincerity tangible. Jake reflected on his own approach. For years, blame and resentment had been his companions, keeping him company in solitude. But hearing Sarah, he felt a flicker of something new, a desire for a perspective shift that could redefine his journey. What if he actively chose to see each setback as an opportunity rather than a dead end? The thought invigorated him. He looked at Sarah, realizing that she provided not just a partnership in this endeavor but also a mirror, reflecting the potential he hadn't dared to acknowledge. They continued walking, navigating through their community, a backdrop marked with familiar faces and places that now felt different under the canopy of night. Each step reinforced Jake's growing determination to confront his fears head-on. Then came a moment of reckoning as they passed a small cafe with a neon sign flickering in the dark. The light cast a glow that illuminated the shadows of doubt lurking in his mind. Suddenly, it occurred to him that hesitation was a choice as well. What if we took a risk with our first project, he proposed, breaking the comfortable silence. What if we focus not just on the stories but on the ways we are willing to expose our own navigating paths in this venture? Sarah's eyes widened, reflecting a spark of excitement. You mean like sharing our own experiences? Exactly, he said, energized by the thought. It was a gamble, one that required him to lay bare his journeys, the fears, the failures, the small victories.
But what if it backfires? What if exposing ourselves leads to criticism?
Sarah questioned, her brow furrowing slightly.
Then we learn from it, Jake replied, feeling the burgeoning courage inside him fight against the remnants of his defenses. But we should put authenticity into practice. We can't preach accountability without showing it ourselves. For the first time since they embarked on this venture, Jake felt the power of clarity enkindled within him. A path unfolded, a commitment to be both vulnerable and brave, to allow their audience to see behind the curtain of their creative pressures. Yet, as the conversation reached this pivotal juncture, an underlying fear surfaced. Would releasing his demons also unleash the ghosts he had buried? Would illuminating his journey risk overwhelming Sarah or shifting their professional dynamic? The tension hung in the air, and Jake could feel the stakes rising, just beyond the threshold of his understanding. As they returned from their walk, each step echoing possibilities, he understood that they were on the precipice of something monumental. He needed answers. A confrontation with his past was inevitable, and the next move was crucial. Could he rise to the challenge, or would the shadows of his past overwhelm the light he was only beginning to embrace? Jake woke up the next morning invigorated yet anxious. The previous night's conversation replayed in his mind like an old record, and the weight of possibility felt heavier with dawn's light. He had committed to a new path, one that involved opening the door to his own vulnerabilities and sharing them with Sarah. But the unsettling question remained, was he ready to truly unpack those demons? As he brewed coffee, the droning sound of the machine allowed his thoughts to wander. The idea of sharing his past movements, a collage of mistakes, missed opportunities, fleeting successes, felt like willingly exposing an open wound. But wasn't that the essence of authenticity? The thought filled him with a mixture of determination and dread. With a steely resolve, he made a list. He meticulously penned down the significant moments that had shaped him, events that lingered as whispers in the crevices of his mind. His father's abandonment, his struggle to find his footing in college, the failed relationships that had slowly chipped away at his self-esteem. Each word was a brushstroke, revealing the portrait of a man who had not merely been lost but had often hidden from the map of his life. A knock at the door jolted him back to the moment. It was Sarah, her face bright and eager, yet there was an edge of worry in her expression. "I thought we could brainstorm more about our approach today," she said, stepping inside. The warmth of her presence grounded him, and he felt a flicker of hope spurring him on. "Yeah, let us do that," he replied, though his heart raced as he realized he would need to pull from the depths of his list. Sharing his journey with her felt nebulous, but he trusted her heart. Her unwavering commitment to understanding him was evident, making its surface seem inviting yet daunting. They sat down at his dining table littered with papers, sketches, and half-empty coffee mugs, readying themselves for an intense dialogue. With pens in hand, they discussed various angles for their project, how to weave their stories seamlessly with the narratives they intended to tell. But as the conversation flowed, Jake's fortitude began to falter. The list lay folded in his pocket, heavy with expectation. With every idea they explored, he sensed the intertwining of his fears and aspirations, threatening to suffocate him in the process. "Jake, let us take what we've learned individually and find a unifying theme," Sarah suggested, enthusiasm sparkling in her eyes. "What about the idea of our struggles as a foundation to build something relatable?" There it was again, the sharp pang of vulnerability. The irony tugged at him. Here he was, yearning to connect on a deeper level, yet clinging to the barriers he had crafted for years. Sharing our struggles could lead to a more raw connection, but his voice trailed off. "But what?" Sarah prodded gently, sensing his hesitation. "What if people judge us? What if we expose too much?" He urged, the internal battle rising to the surface. "What if my past overshadows what we're trying to create?" Her expression softened, and she leaned closer. "Then we own it. We embrace the faults, the mistakes. They are part of who we are. They've shaped us." Jake absorbed her words, a realization breaking through the cobwebs of his anxiety. Perhaps it was in this very act of sharing that healing could begin, not just for him, but for anyone who might relate to his revelations. Fueled by a new wave of courage, he reached for the list in his pocket and slowly unfolded it, his fingers trembling. As he read through the significant moments, he laid each one on the table like laid out tiles in a mosaic of his life, each piece a part of the overarching story they could tell together. But just as he began connecting the dots, a sudden doubt flashed in his mind. What if this act of sharing caused fractures in their working relationship? Would Sarah still see him as an equal, or would she perceive him through the lens of his past mistakes?
The question loomed large, creating a swell of tension that threatened to derail the momentum they had built.
Jake's heart raced. His vulnerability a bridge or a canyon? The atmosphere thickened when he glanced at Sarah.
Her eyes held an unwavering belief in him, and in that moment, he understood that this was about far more than just their professional venture. It was a journey of rediscovery for both of them.
"Okay, let us do this," Jake finally said, his voice steady with an underlying tremor of determination. It was time to break down barriers, to risk everything. As the foundation of their project expanded before them, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the opening act. Soon enough, the real confrontation, one he had both dreaded and anticipated, would arrive. But what awaited him in the depths of his own past, and how would it redefine his future with Sarah? Jake took a deep breath as he prepared to dive into the tapestry of his life, his heart pounding with both fear and determination. Sarah glanced at him, her urgency unmasked, waiting for him to bridge the gap of silence that had settled between them. The moment demanded courage, a quality he had spent years stifling beneath layers of self-protection. As he looked down at the list, the words no longer felt like echoes of defeat. Instead, they shimmered with potential, each moment a stepping stone towards a more authentic self. "Okay," Jake said, finally finding his voice. "Let us start with my father. He left when I was young. That's where it all began for me." He could see Sarah's interest spark, her pen hovering above the page. The thought of vocalizing his pain felt like touching a live wire, yet he urged himself to keep moving. "His absence defined a lot of my childhood. I learned to be self-reliant, but it also made me wary of forming connections." As he spoke, the words began to flow more easily. Sarah listened intently, nodding, her eyes never leaving his. She was not just hearing him, she was witnessing him, and that was the first step toward empowerment he so desperately needed. "What I didn't expect was how much that absence would affect my relationships. I would build walls around myself, finding it hard to let anyone in," Jake continued, his voice gaining strength. "When I started dating, I thought if I could just create the perfect version of myself, people would love me." Sarah spoke softly, almost reverently, "But that wasn't the real you, was it?" A rush of realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. "No, it wasn't he. I became a caricature of myself, all to shield the little boy who felt abandoned." They worked through the moments, Jake revealing pieces of his past like a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble. His college experiences, the pressures that culminated in panic attacks when he felt he was failing, and the failed relationships that left him emotionally depleted. Each line he shared resonated with vulnerability, pulling him deeper into a journey of self-discovery, but somewhere in that vulnerability, a twinge of fear still crept back. What would happen if Sarah began to see him as someone broken? Would she be able to hold on to the man who was standing before her? As Jake hesitated, uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. "Jake," she said gently, breaking through his spiral of doubt. "We all have scars. Those scars tell our stories, but they don't define us. You're doing something courageous by sharing this." Her reassurance sparked a flicker of determination within him. He needed to believe this was not just an exercise in exposure but a chance to reclaim the narrative of his life. With newfound zeal, he pushed forward, sharing not only failures but also the moments that had sparked joy and growth. The launch of his small graphic design business became a beacon of hope, showcasing his resilience and creativity, yet, the depth of his emotions was undeniable. As they dissected each thread, he began to question not merely how to share these experiences but how they intertwined with his partnership with her. This project wasn't just about personal narratives, it was about mutual discovery, blending their pasts into a future they could fashion together. Just as he began to see the threads of connection, he felt an unease creeping back in, a dark specter of fear. What if revealing his vulnerabilities to Sarah drew them closer, yet ultimately jeopardized their collaboration? Would transparency reveal strengths or lay bare insecurities that could fracture their bond? Jake's swirling thoughts were abruptly pulled back into focus as Sarah's next words snapped him back to the moment. "We're going to be real, Jake. I'm in this with you, every step of the way."
He felt the warmth of her support encircle him, and for the first time, he envisioned the potential beauty of vulnerability as a foundation. Perhaps this would indeed be a joint expedition where each revelation would reinforce their connection rather than diminish. Yet, a deeper question lingered in the back of Jake's mind, casting an ominous shadow. What would it take to craft this narrative without losing himself in the process? Would they emerge stronger together, or would the act of revealing too much lead them to expose hidden truths better left untold? With these thoughts swirling, Jake braced himself for the profound exploration that lay ahead. What awaited him was not just the unveiling of his past, but a journey into the unknown future he would have to navigate with a partner who believed in him. The next chapter began with a choice, one that would either bind them closer or risk unraveling everything. What would be his next move, and would he be ready to face the hidden parts he had yet to confront? Jake had taken a significant step forward in exploring the depths of his past, but the culmination of his journey was yet to unfold. Realizing that vulnerability could serve as his foundation for change, he understood it was time to blend both his aspirations and scars into a cohesive vision. Their project had transformed from a professional venture to a personal exploration, binding him and Sarah in a quest for authenticity. As they carefully crafted their mission statement, the compass guiding their purpose shifted. The story they were about to tell needed to be genuine, one that resonated with others grappling with their own struggles. Jake felt a profound shift within himself, as if he was finally ready to own the narrative of his life, allowing the light to enter the shadows he had buried. Let us emphasize that our journey isn't about perfection, but about progress, he suggested, the idea sparking excitement in the air around them. Sarah nodded, her enthusiasm palpable. We must remind our audience that everyone has battles. Celebrating victories, no matter how small, is crucial. Jake realized their collaboration had morphed into a powerful alliance, where trust and shared ambitions created a fertile ground for growth. The daunting fears of unveiling their vulnerabilities began to dissipate, replaced by anticipation for the transformation of their lives and the impact it could have on others. He felt alive with possibilities, envisioning community projects that could inspire connection through openness and creativity. With each draft they developed, a tapestry of shared experiences emerged, threading personal journeys into collective resilience. For Jake, this wasn't just about professional success anymore, it became a chance to redefine his identity. He saw his past not as chains binding him, but as stepping stones leading him toward a brighter future. The culmination of their project approached, and with it, an invitation to showcase their work at a local community forum. The idea both exhilarated and terrified him. What if I fall short? He asked Sarah, vulnerability creeping into his voice. What if the audience sees past my facade? But Sarah's presence provided an anchor. Then we own it, Jake. We're here to share, not just to impress, she reassured. Confidence surged within him, and he nodded, embracing the truth in her words. Showtime arrived, and the forum echoed with voices eager to learn and share. As Jake stood behind the podium, he felt a wave of fear wash over him. But momentarily, he glanced at Sarah, who beamed with encouragement, her unwavering belief fortifying his resolve. He stepped to the microphone, ready to speak honestly about his journey, about the wounds that shaped him and the triumphs that propelled him forward. Today, I stand here not as a millionaire, he began, his heart racing, but as a man who has learned the value of authenticity through pain and hope. The audience shifted, intrigued as he shared his life's mosaic, the loss, the struggle, and the lessons learned along the way. He displayed his vulnerability not as a weakness but as strength, illuminating how each scar had contributed to his growth. As their project unfolded before the crowd's eyes, Jake felt a unity emerge, a bond transcending their individual stories, one that invited the audience to reflect on their own paths. The room erupted in applause, not just for his journey, but for the courage they all felt reflected in each shared experience. In that moment, Jake realized he hadn't only reclaimed his identity, he had paved the way for others to do the same. The speaker, who had once felt overshadowed by fear, now radiated confidence, buoyed by the communion of shared stories. Afterward, the energy surged as participants approached, expressing gratitude and sharing their own narratives. Jake's heart swelled. For the first time, he embraced his role as a connector, a builder not just of spaces, but of relationships and emotions. He dedicated himself to fostering a community where dreams could blossom from vulnerability, just as his had. Standing alongside Sarah amidst the crowd, he felt an indelible bond forged through the fires of shared vulnerability and collective ambition. The hesitation that once clouded their dynamic had dissipated, replaced by a profound respect and recognition of each other's strength. "You did it," Sarah whispered, her smile radiant. "We did it," Jake replied, recognizing that their collaboration had transcended mere business. It had awakened something transformative. Together, they stepped into the future armed with courage, ignited by purpose, and entangled in shared dreams, ready to build more than just structures. They would cultivate spaces where every individual could find their voice and weave their own stories of triumph. Reflecting on the journey from loneliness to connection, Jake understood that he hadn't merely conquered his past, he had cultivated a deep-rooted resilience, one that would empower him, Sarah, and others to strive for authenticity. He knew this was only the beginning, a promising prelude to a future ripe with opportunities yet to unfold. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.